So bones, and I love this module. Bones and joints are really the foundation of human movement. So bones, it's like so, like the crunchy. It's like in a movie theater when you hear the thing opening. No, it's totally good. So bones and joints are the foundation for movement in the human body. And so in this lesson, we're going to look at the purpose and the structure of your bones and your joints and your cartilage. Just because if you can understand how joints move, then we can move people functionally. In a nutshell, when we're teaching yoga, we want to move people in a way that is appropriate for their joints. So by understanding how joints move, you'll be able to move them in a safer way. You'll be like, oh, this joint actually isn't supposed to twist. Therefore, I shouldn't try to make it twist, kind of thing. So we're going to look at the bones, the major bones of the skeleton. We're going to look at what a synovial joint is, different style, different kinds of joints. And then finally, we'll look at cartilage and how bones can be different human to human. So what would you be like? What is the purpose of your bones? Imagine you didn't have any bones.
Support, just a puddle on the floor.
Yeah, puddle on the floor. So support. What else do your bones give you?
It gives structure to all the other like muscles and organs.
Yes.
It holds partially provides like a shell for your organs.
Amazing. Yeah. So it provides shape and structure, like like a container, basically. Protection. Yeah, like your skull. This is like a bone that protects your brain. Your ribs protect your viscera. So bones are actually considered connective tissue. Interestingly enough, yes, they're considered a type of connective tissue because they provide the shape, the structure, and the support for you to function. They also permit movement, which is one of the primary things too. Like we wouldn't be able to get very far if we didn't have any bones. So they create structure and support, allow for movement at joints. There's protection of your internal organs. And this is cool, your bones store calcium and mineral salts. So as a little fun fact, your skeleton is not the same skeleton that you had 10 years ago. Because throughout your day and throughout your life, you are constantly leaching calcium out of your bones and then putting it back in. So there's this constant breakdown, build up, breakdown, build up. We think of our skeleton as being inert because when we look at a skeleton, we're like, it just looks like a white dead thing, but actually your bones are very alive and are always changing, which is really, really cool. And then in your long bones produce your red and your white blood cells. So now you can, and don't worry, I can share the slides with you too. So good. So composition of bones. So let's take a look at what your bones are made of. So what do you guys think? Any ideas? What goes into your bones? Calcium, yes, you got some calcium in there. All the commercials tell us so. Drink your milk or whatever. Strong bones. So bones are made of both organic and inorganic materials. So there's collagen in your bones. So collagen is a protein that's made in your body. It's stronger than steel. It's a tensile strength, which is stronger than steel, which is amazing, but it's alive. And then you also have the calcium and the mineral salts, which is the inorganic material. So does this composition between collagen and calcium and this kind of inorganic and organic stuff, do you think the composition of your bones changes over time? Yes. Think about a kid falling as opposed to your grandma falling. So when, kids bounce, don't try it, but I mean, they're bouncier. They're more like greenwood, whereas as we get older, our bones get harder and kind of harder. And then there's also things like osteoporosis later on. But basically, it's like we're a little squishier when we're younger, and our bones get a little bit more brittle and more hard when we're older. So when you're older and you break a bone, it'll break more cleanly, but it might take longer to heal. So the structure of a bone is that basically the outside of your bone is this hard, compact bone. And this is what gives most of your structure, most of your skeleton its weight. And then the inside is spongy. And like if you've ever eaten the marrow out of bones, like cracked bones open or chewed on them and stuff like that. Sorry, vegetarians, but is anyone a vegetarian? Is there?
No, vegan.
Vegan. Well, yeah. No? Okay. Don't want to offend anybody. And so the inside is squishy. It's squishy and collapsible, and you can chew on it. But when we think about a skeleton, we usually just think about the white bones, which is an illusion because your bones are actually vascular. They have a blood supply and they're quite juicy, actually. So I'm going to show you a slide, which is kind of gross, but also super awesome. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Ta-da! That is a femur head, harvested from a recent hip replacement surgery. Look how moist it is. It's a moist. Yum, yum. You can see the marrow in the middle, the juicy, juicy marrow. And you can see how this bone is compact, right? And this is the spongy, squishy. It almost looks porous or like a honeycomb. And notice how wet it is and how red it is, right? So we have this idea, totally understandably, that our bones are white and hard and brittle and kind of like dead tree branches. But in fact, they're very alive. So it's good for us to remember that. So in general, we can break our bones up, our skeleton up between the axial and appendicular skeleton. You guys, this isn't really important. It's just a way of saying the bones along the center and the bones that are kind of more sticky outy and make the limbs. So take a guess for a minute. How many bones do you think we usually have in our body? Just take a random guess. 300. 1,000. Can I get 4,000? So as a general rule, we have 206. But why do I say general?
Because people are born differently. Somebody might be born with a weird tailbone or missing a rib or
Extra fingers. Amazing, Liz, exactly, right? Because people will have more or less bones. So 206 is just kind of like if you took 100 people, that might be the average number of bones that they all have. But individually, some people have more, some people have less. Some people have extra vertebrae in their spine, right? Some people have organs which are shaped very differently. It's crazy. So we say generally 206 bones. Bones have different shapes depending on what their function is in the body. So for example, the ribs, what is the function of the ribs? Protect the lungs, yeah. I mean, we'll also go into, they help you breathe, but they're protecting our lungs and our heart. What is our skull protecting? I'm afraid of finding another little creature. Yeah, the skull, it's like it's a flat bone, right? And to protect the delicate brain. The long bones of our legs, what are the functions of longer bones? Movement. Imagine if you had really short leg bones. Would you be able to move as well? No, you wouldn't be able to move as fast. Maybe you could move as well, but maybe not as quickly or cover as much distance. So longer bones help us to cover more distance. These kinds of bones, our smaller articulating bones, are really good for dexterity. So depending on the bone shape and size will depend on what it's being used for. So let's do an activity right now. Everybody stand up. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. And give me somebody. Jen, you want to come with me? Okay, great. Jen's going to be my volunteer. We're going to touch each other and we're going to palpate. So I'll say, Jen, may I touch you?
You may. You're already doing it.
I'm a bad teacher. May I touch you? In this creepy, creepy way. Sorry. So go ahead and stand behind your partner. We're going to do a little call and response, and we'll go through the major bones in the body just to get some of the terms in our mouths, right? So you can start at the head. So good. So ask them if you can touch them.
Yes.
I know.
Nice.
Oh, okay, so go ahead, let's touch their skull. Repeat after me, cranium.
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 Good, come on down here and find very delicately, find the collarbone, which is called the clavicle.
Clavicle.
Clavicle. I'm just going to turn you around for a sec. And then coming on to the back here, you'll feel this kind of bony ridge, and you can palpate it. It's a triangle-shaped bone. It's called the scapula. Scapula. Feel nice? Yeah. Okay, good. And then coming to the arm bone, this is called the humerus. Repeat after me, humerus.
Humerus.
Okay, coming down to the elbow here, this long bone that runs from her elbow down to her pinky. You'll feel there's a long, hard bone there. This is called the ulna.
Ulna.
Ulna. This bone here that runs on the top down to the thumb is called the radius.
Radius.
Radius. Yes. These bones of the wrist, you relax here. So these are the bones, the heel of the hand. These are called the carpals. Carpals.
Carpals.
Thank you. And then we have the metacarpals, which are the long bones of the palm. Say metacarpals.
Metacarpals.
Metacarpals. And then the fingers are the phalanges. Phalanges. All right, good. Yeah, you have to say it like that. Phalanges. Okay, good. So come on down. We'll talk about the spine more in depth, but you can take a moment to palpate down the back of the spine here. You can feel the little processes on the back of the spine. And then we'll just call this the pelvis for now. It has some more bones in it, but take your hands into the waistline and press down, and you'll feel the top of the pelvis. Right. This is actually, technically, this is called the ilium. It's one of the bones of the pelvis. You can say ilium.
Ilium.
Yeah. Okay, good. Coming to the outside, this is called the femur. So usually encased in lots of muscular goodness. The femur. The kneecap at the front, bend your knee a little bit. Yeah, so the front of the knee, this bone is called the patella. Patella. And then the front of the shin, you feel this, like this thing could like kill a person, right? This sharp, hard, pokey bone.
Really hurts when you hit it.
Really hurts when you hit it. Really, especially against your bed, right? This is called the tibia. Tibia. And this bone along the outside of the leg is called the fibula. Fibula, and it's kind of scrawny. It's mostly for a muscle site for attachments. Site for muscle attachments. But here's something cool. Turn around front. Okay, you know how you think you have ankle bones? You don't. This is the tibia, and this is the fibula. It's the bottom of your leg bones. I know. Isn't that crazy? I know. We'll look at a picture of a skeleton in your book and you'll see. But this is actually a leg bone and a leg bone coming down. Yeah. And then here, just like we mirror each other, upper body and lower body. These are called the tarsals. Repeat after me. Tarsals. Metatarsals. Metatarsals. And then these are called the phalanges again. Phalanges. Okay? All right, switch. Okay.
Want to get palpated too?
I want to get palpated.
May I touch you?
You may touch me.
Okay.
Please touch me. Okay, repeat after me. Cranium.
Cranium.
Feel how weird and bony it is? Got all these little...
No bugs.
Any ticks?
$5 a tick.
Ooh.
Ew. It's like getting a latte for every tick you find. It's so gross. Okay, hands down, find the clavicle. So this is the clavicle. I love this bone. Isn't it pretty?
It is. Elegant.
It's very elegant. It is. And then to the outside, you can really see my bony little shoulders. The scapula. Scapula.
Scapula.
Scapula. Good. And then the upper arm bone is called the humerus.
Humerus.
Humerus. And then the bone from the elbow to the pinky is called the ulna.
Ulna.
Ulna. U-L-N-A, ulna. And then the bone that runs along the top to the thumb is called the radius.
Radius.
Yep. And then the wrist bones are called the carpals.
Carpals.
Carpals. And then the long bones of the palm are called the metacarpals.
Metacarpals.
And then what are the fingers again?
Phalanges.
Phalanges. Good. And then just go ahead and palpate down the back of the spine. You can feel the spinous processes, the little sticky outy bones at the back of your spine. Yep. Okay. And then bring your hands to the waist. Press down, and you'll feel the top of the pelvis. It feels nice, actually. It feels really grounding. Mm-hmm. Oh. So that's technically the ilium. The ilium. Yeah, the iliac crest. And then let's have a little gander here at the femur. So the femur bone. I think this is the longest bone in your body.
Isn't it also like the thickest?
It may be like the biggest bone. Yes, I think that sounds right to me. And then there's the patella, which is the kneecap. Yeah, you can wiggle it. Actually, it won't wiggle right now, but yeah. So then we have the shin bone, which is the tibia. Tibia. Good. And you can run that all the way down to the inner ankle, right? That's the bottom of your tibia. I know, isn't that weird? And then that freaked me out when I figured that out. And then the fibula, which runs down to your outer ankle. Yeah, so that bone, yeah, it's hard to feel because it's covered in,
Inside here, right?
yeah, it would be here actually along the outside. You can feel it here. Feel that thing?
Yep.
Yeah, and then down to there. Yeah. And then we have the tarsals. So that includes your heel bone. Your heel bone is one of the tarsals. It's basically a big thick bone, and then you have a bunch of little like square-like bones that kind of move against each other. They're called the tarsals. And then the long bones of your foot are called the metatarsals. And then your toes are called your phalanges. Thank you, Jen. You're welcome. Yeah. There we go. Nice little massage. So now that we know kind of what the bones are, we're going to look at how they move together. So what is a joint?
A midsection. It's a contact point for two bones to move.
That's right. Just okay. A joint, anatomically, is a place where two bones meet. So a place where two bones meet. So the shape of how those two surfaces interface dictate what kind of movement is possible. Make sense? Yeah. So we have different kinds of joints. Like your skull, you actually have joints, like two bones meet in your skull, but they don't move. So not all joints actually move. They move a little bit, like your craniosacral people will tell you. They move a little bit. But those are like, they're called immovable joints because they don't move much. And then we have like the joints here, which are separated by your intervertebral discs. So those are cartilaginous joints. But the joints that we're mostly interested in are called synovial joints. So a synovial joint is the joints we usually think of, like elbows, knees, shoulders, blah, blah, blah. And what characterizes a synovial joint, it's a much more freely moving joint, right? And it's encapsulated with like a joint capsule that secretes something called synovial fluid. Thank you. So synovial fluid, I like to call it the slipperiest substance known to man. Like the best lube ever, if you could market it for such a purpose. So like seriously, I opened up the knee joint and you're like, oh my gosh, it's like, it's crazy. And what it does is when you move, your joint capsule secretes the synovial fluid and it allows these bones to move against each other without sticking and to reduce friction. So that's why you need synovial capsules, is so that your bones can move. And they're quite close, but it's pretty amazing. So a synovial joint, you have your bone, it's covered in cartilage, which we'll talk about in a sec, and then it's surrounded by a joint capsule, which kind of holds it together, and then it has synovial fluid inside. So that's most of the joints we think of, elbows, knees, hips, etc., are synovial joints. All the fingers. What's amazing is that you have these little joint capsules like around, like your toes. They have little tiny joint capsules around them and move. It's crazy. So there are different kinds of joints. So the way that they meet determines the kind of movement. So for example, you may have a joint which kind of connects and only moves here. This is called a hinge joint. So what's an example of a hinge joint in your body? Knee. Yes, and the knee, when we do anatomy of the knee, we'll see why that's special. But yes, that is a hinge joint. What else is a hinge joint? Elbow, hinge joint.
Jaw.
Your jaw. You know what? I've never really studied the jaw. So I don't know. I know it goes like this, but it also can go side to side.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. But good. I want to look into that. Holly, that is a stumper. That's a good one. Your fingers. These are actually hinge joint, your little fingers. We have, so that's hinge joint. Planar joints. A plane joint is just when you have two flat surfaces moving. We don't see these to the surface of our body very much, so they're a little bit more of a mystery. But in your carpals are like a bunch of like square little dice put together, and your tarsals here, they're a bunch of little square bones kind of put together. They slide against each other. So when you have two flat surfaces sliding like that, that is a plane joint. Pivot joint. Can anyone think of where we might have a pivot joint in our body? So a pivot joint is like this. Your hip moves in all directions. So a pivot can only move in this direction. That your ankle is, let's come back to ankle. Ankle is an awesome joint, but the movement of the ankle actually looks like a ball and socket, but it's caused by the movement of two different joints acting with each other. That was such a fancy way to say, yes, your atlantoaxial joint. So in other words, in the top of your skull, between the first two cervical vertebrae, they're very specialized and they do this. This is why you can turn your head so well. The other pivot joint in your body is located in your forearm, right beneath your elbow, which allows you to do this. Useful again for writing, coffee cups, turning doorknobs. So 2 pivot joints in your body, here and here. What about the condyloid joint is just basically like an oval, and that's like the base of your finger. So you can do this, you can twirl your finger, but you can't twist it. Right, so that's like an oval joint. Saddle joint, now this is totally weird looking. So I think of it like this, right? So it can slide this way, it can slide back and forth, but it can't twist. So a saddle joint, for example, is like the base of your thumb. So your thumb is opposable. Everyone give it a try. Notice how you can move it in all directions. It's almost like a ball and socket joint, right? But you can't twist it. And then ball and socket joint. Where do we have a ball and socket joint?
Hips.
Hips, right? We can move it in any direction. Where else? Shoulder. So those joints have a lot of movement. So you can see, depending on the kind of joint that you have, will determine the available movement. So for example, while the hip can move in all different ranges, like it's a ball and socket joint, it's got lots of mobility, the knee only likes to move like this. So when we try to make the knee do twisty things like it's a ball and socket joint, that's not treating the knee very well. And in yoga, this comes up a lot because we have so many hip openers. So we'll investigate that more deeply. But the moral of the story here, the only joints that we're really going to discuss in the teacher training are going to be the ball and socket joints and the hinge joints. So, but it's nice for us to know that these different shapes exist, and that's what determines movement. So the shape of the joint determines what kind of movement is functional and safe for that joint to do. Does that make sense? That's the moral of the story. That's the key takeaway here. Any questions on the kinds of joints? Cool. So just to come back to the ankle for a moment, because this is great. The ankle is a combination of joints. The feet and the hands are amazing. So at the ankle, we have a hinge joint, which goes like this. But then underneath it, we have a joint that wobbles like this, and then we have a bunch of little bony cuboid bones that slide against each other, which allows us to do this with our foot. This is, pronate, supinate kind of thing. So the combination of all those joints moving together gives our foot and ankle the illusion that it's a ball and socket joint. But it's not. And it has a lot more stability. So this whole structure is fascinating because it's both stable, which we need to stand, but imagine trying to stand on your hip, but it's very stable, but it also has a lot of mobility. So that's why it looks like a ball and socket joint, but it is something else. I feel the heat. Do you guys feel the heat? Feel the heat. Okay, good. Oops, I'm going down. Okay, so skeletal variation. So you guys, here's a look at a pelvi, 2 different pelvi. Now, this is just a continuation of our understanding that the joint shape determines what movement is possible. And here's just one example of how different our structure can be. So if you look at this person here, this is their pelvis, this is their joint, right? Their femur bone, their hip socket is facing forward, yes? Whereas in this pelvis, look how much more to the side it's facing. Does that make sense? So we can see how, and these are real human bones. You can check them out at paulgreeley.com. He has tons of pictures, super interesting. So who is going to have an easier time doing warrior 2 and squaring their pelvis forward? That person, right? Because their femur bone can stick straight out to the side. Is this person going to be able to square their hips? No. Is it because they're a bad yogi? Is it because they're not flexible enough? No. So what this is it's a wake-up call for us as teachers to know that not everybody is going to have the same aesthetic expression of a pose, and that's totally appropriate and amazing and just an expression of human diversity. So it's not for us to solve all these riddles now, but we just want to open our eyes to how different the skeleton can be. Here's another example. The femur bone here, you can see this femur, this is your thigh bone. This femur has a really long neck. This one has a short little neck. Who might be able to move their leg a lot more? This guy, girl, human. Right, this person's not going to have quite as much freedom because the bone isn't as long. Whereas this person, they're getting their thigh bone way out of the socket, so they may be able to move it a lot more. So again, it's not something for us to solve, but just to know, wow, my students may have a really different internal structure that's going to make their movement look really different on the outside. Yeah?
Sometimes you can sort of see that when, especially the difference between males and females, because I know a lot of guys who actually do the splits really well. Like, I've never been able to do it, even when I was 5 years old in my gymnastics class.
That's right. It was because you didn't try? No.
Slacker.
No, but yeah, some people have crazy ranges of movement, and it will determine lots of things. Like your ability, like some people can only lift their knee up this high to their chest. That's going to make it really hard in yoga for them to step their foot all the way forward because they literally don't have the joint shape to lift their knee up. Whereas someone who can bring their knee back behind them is going to have an easier time doing things like, I don't know, arm balances. The length of your arms may make it easier for you to do, I don't know, like a weird arm balance where it's helpful to have long arms or to lift your body up, right? Having a short torso and shorter legs might make it easier for you to do press handstand and look fancy, where someone who has a really long body and really long legs, well, that's a lot more to lever up there. So our proportions are going to be different, and this is really important for us as teachers to know so we can empower our students to embrace their own physicality and the uniqueness of their own structure and shape.
It's too bad it's not mentioned more to students.
This is why we're here.
Right? Like,
Sherilyn, you can mention it.
But that's what, like how Leila says about that, to your body's capability.
Yes.
So I can look at the person beside me who's amazing, has had that flexibility because I have some mobility issues.
Yes.
And where that limitation is it the path of least resistance, or am I actually just not unable?
This is the thorny question, again, which we're not going to solve today, but the thorny question that we want to keep alive for us as teachers is somebody falling into a compensation, or is this the structure of their body? Exactly. This is the beginning of teaching more towards the purpose of the pose and less towards the aesthetics of the pose.
And to remind people that it's okay, just to observe it, it's not a judgment. Give yourself
Yeah.
a break.
Yeah. Well, and it's beautiful. Like, not only do we want to say, like, move to your capability, it's like embrace and celebrate what your body is capable of. Right. So it's not like, oh, I'm sorry, you have short arms. Right. Okay, I want to move on to cartilage real quick. So, woo.
Yeah.
Okay, so cartilage. Cartilage is a really important, cartilage is also a kind of connective tissue in our body. And it's really important in terms of providing support and also for movement. So if you've ever eaten some chicken wings, you know that shiny stuff on the ends of bones here. This is articular cartilage, also called hyaline cartilage. And basically it's like a little rubber coating for your bones so that they don't wear and tear against each other, right? But over time in life, when it does wear and tear and causes frictions, that's what arthritis is. Right, so it's when your cartilage breaks down. But we have it on the ends of our bones, super helpful, so that with synovial fluid helps those joints to stay fluid and mobile and healthy. The other kind of cartilage that we want to just mention here is something called fibrocartilage, which is more fibrous, as the name would imply, like in your intervertebral discs. So in your spine, you have bone, disc. Well, those they're fluffier, and they provide like shock absorption, right? And support. So you also have like a little cartilage disc right here between the two bones of your pubis. And so these bones, as they come together, don't bang into each other. There's a little squishy thing in between them. So cartilage is really important in movement. So some common injuries that can happen to bones and joints. And this isn't for us to solve any injury problems, but it's just to give us a language to understand what might have been happening for our students. So arthritis, as we said, is when the cartilage breaks down, the cartilage that is giving a nice little coating to the ends of the bones. When that breaks down, then inflammation happens, and that's called arthritis, and that's painful, right? Yeah?
But there's a big difference between osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, right? There isn't
There is.
arthritis.
It's an immune system problem.
So that's different than what you're you're saying it's osteo.
Correct. It's inflammation as well, but it's caused by an immune problem in your body rather than by the wear and tear. That's right. That's rheumatoid arthritis. So 2 different kinds.
Or an acute injury rather than chronic. Because like you don't get arthritis just by an injury. Like,
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like we don't break our leg and get arthritis.
Right.
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 Yeah.
It's more like a chronic over time.
Aging,
Yes.
you're like-
Yes.
like you said,
Aging. Yes, aging. And don't worry, there's going to be time to talk about injuries more in depth. This is just a quick brush over some that are directly related, but there's a whole module on injuries that we'll go through. People might have joint replacements. Bunions are when the big bones of your big toes push against their neighbor. And here's a little picture of that. Oops, nope, sorry. It's in the right-hand side. That's a bunion. It's kind of interesting. When the fibrocartilage gets worn down, so cartilaginous injury, another cartilaginous challenge, like in the intervertebral discs and they get squashed over time in life, that can lead to things called bulging discs or herniated discs. So that would be a cartilaginous issue. Breaks and fractures. Now, hopefully you're not going to see these people in your yoga class, but you know, obviously a bone could break or a bone could fracture. And we'll talk about other kinds of fascial injuries when we look at ligaments and tendons later. But those are just a couple of things that might come up. You'll probably see students in your class more who have the chronic injuries, things like arthritis, because they're just living with this kind of stuff. So people with arthritis may come to your class. That is a really nasty picture. It's an alarming picture. All right, so again, we have our review, but I'm going to leave us to do that over your lunch break or whatever, your 5-minute break, to get together and go through these questions. And maybe we'll have a quick confab about it just after lunch, if that makes sense for you, because I think it's time for us to practice. So before we wrap up here, any questions about bones and joints? And just to summarize, our key takeaway with bones and joints is that a joint is a place where 2 bones meet, and the shape of that interface is what's going to determine its functional movement. Cool? All right. Awesome, you guys.